Yourselves on mute. Feel free to ask questions at any time and raise your hand. Given there's not that many, it's not going to be quite as hard. And then, if there's any kind of feedback or comments you want to put in the chat, put them in the chat. Jenny's going to keep her eye on the chat for me. And I say you're going to be given an opportunity to work in small groups. I'm hoping a few more people join, and that we can get at least 2 groups going. And then we'll get feedback from the groups. So the agenda today was sort of background to why this call came around, some context. So we'll give you some context. And apologies that you're all expecting Mel. She is going to join shortly. She's just finishing off another call. So I'm sure when Mel joins, she'll take over and add so much more that I miss out. And then we're going to put you into some breakout rooms, a chance to share ideas, and then we'll come back, we'll collect the ideas, and we'll also then go back into another breakout room. So the topic, and if everybody remembered, in the April meeting, we had Corinne Lurie join us, and Corinne did a great job of emphasising about the data collection and effective presentation. She talked a little bit about using statistical techniques and the way you can use statistical techniques to show your data. But she really focused on saying to us that unless you collect the data, you're not going to be able to analyze it. And to collect the data, you really need a strategy for what are you going to collect, when are you going to collect it, and how are you going to collect it. There's 2 links there that I will put in the chat later on, so that you can go to the write-up we did of the event, and you can also go to the YouTube of the recording. But you do need the link to get to the YouTube. It's not searchable. So the context for this was that benefits from effective change management are often hard to identify. And I know when I've sat in rooms of people saying, okay, what's the benefit of doing change management on this project? People have really struggled with it. They've really struggled because they can only find those softer benefits, or people will be a bit happier. It'll be easier for people to do. And so we often say, well, what does that mean? How do we get to it? And as I say, there's often tangible or sentimental measures. But we want to think about, how do you turn those implicit benefits into explicit benefits, so that you can really measure them? Because if they're not explicit, they're very difficult to measure. And we also sometimes need a little bit of creativity and get people thinking creatively about how you turn that implicit measure into an explicit measure. And sometimes people find it easier if they've got a little bit of a process. So we'll talk a little bit tonight about having a process to move us from that idea about what that benefit could be to what we can measure. So some examples here, and we use the example of psychological safety, and we looked at those kind of what the activity might be that you can see people feeling that they're in a safe environment. So, people might speak up. People might feel that they're not criticised. They don't wait to be asked to do something. They speak up and say, should I do this? They might be happy to admit things they're not so good at, or failures that have happened. And if you're happy to admit there's a failure somewhere, you're more likely for the failure to be known. You're more likely to learn from that failure, and you're more likely to fix it for the future. You might find that people are willing to experiment a bit more. So they'll have a go at things. People will ask questions. You won't be there in a meeting where you kind of put an idea forward and people don't actually say anything and you don't know what to do with it. They might come up and ask lots of questions. You might increase knowledge by getting people sharing more. You might gain confidence. You might get people feeling their voice is actually heard and respected. And how many employee surveys have we seen where those questions about my voice is heard or I feel respected and valued? So you might then find people taking their own initiative, people volunteering to do things. And so then we look at measures. So what could be the potential measures? So you might be able to measure this by going, well, how many collaborations are taking place? What's the breadth of involvement in the collaborations, both inside and outside the organisation? Because sometimes we forget about outside of the organisation. And then we might be looking at the number of self-organised social activities, how people become inclusive in the language they use rather than exclusive. Maybe look at the size of social networks. And I've noticed, and I don't fully understand this one, but I've noticed in a number of employee surveys at the moment in companies I've worked with, they're asking the question, I've got a best friend at work. Now that's interesting because that, again, for me, starts thinking about psychological safety. Maybe it's the frequency that people try new things. Maybe it's the number of experiments taking place at any one time. Maybe discussions do take a bit longer, but people are actually learning more from it. And so therefore people are speaking up, the range of people speaking up and the number of volunteers that volunteer for things actually increases. So if I move on to the next slide, so we look at an example here of taking the intangible of psychological safety, and we say we actually create a psychologically safe workforce. That might create some organizational agility. So now we're looking at a process. How do we take the process through and ask those questions to get to where, what is the real benefit? We might get a culture of innovation, which then leads us to a more of a positive reputation in the marketplace. It may be that we get into new markets. It may be that we then get a competitive advantage, which then leads us to increased revenue in our organisation. And so the sources of benefits as well might be the opposite of risk. So if you're doing risk management, in this case, we might say every risk you find about not doing change management well will give us an associated benefit. So financial risk, operational risk, reputation, supplier risk, or mental health risk. So there's another source of data. And so one of the things we looked at not long ago, myself and Mel, is about a process for managing benefits from Steve Jenner. And he talked about identify benefits, use sort of free-form collection of data. Spend some time then categorizing those benefits. So, a formal structured map of project outputs, benefits, and strategic objectives. And then he says, spend some time describing the benefits, having a real clear understanding of what those benefits are. Put in place monitoring and tracking of benefits. And I know from projects I've worked on that can be quite difficult, because sometimes I've worked on projects where we're increasing the data, which is going to make benefits. So we have to then look at how do we take it from where we are today to the future? How do we make sure that we're tracking the right things? And what is the best time to actually get that benefit data? And then, you can start realizing benefits. And one of the things I say to organizations regularly, let's get the benefits defined really carefully, because so often so many projects define the same benefits. And that I said to one organization I worked with, if you add up all of the benefits you've put in these business cases this year, you've got nobody left in that part of the organization. I just want you to be really clear about what we're looking at. So be really careful that you say, this is the benefit I'm going to realise, and this is how we get to it. And one of the things that myself and Mel talked about is the idea on that, when we've got these ones, of adding maybe a benefit strategy. So what are the types and categories of benefits? And what are the measurement types of who will track and measure the use of those metrics? So we talked about the idea that you create that benefit strategy really early in the project. And I'm actually doing that in a project I'm working on at the moment, where I've said, okay, we know what the original benefits were. Let's work backwards. Let's define exactly how we can see that benefit and how we're going to actually find out whether we've made a difference. So that's a really good way of getting an organisation to think through realising the benefits they've put in. So I'm going to double check. I haven't got anybody else joined the waiting room. So sort of any views on this? Is it worth us as a group discussing it and having a kind of chat about what we think? Because the next bit was the going to breakout rooms, and I'm guessing with such a small group, actually it might be quite a valid conversation here. So maybe the idea was to identify the headings and high-level content included. Sorry, Ian.
Sorry, Mel, if that's me, yes, sorry, I don't wish to interrupt. So I've just come out of the GP surgery, so excuse me. Please go on.
No problem, no problem. So anybody, any thoughts on this? I'm not going to put you in breakout rooms because there's just too few of us.
I think the group is probably small enough and not too big to manage a discussion between us.
Yep. And I'm just going to, if I go out of that and I open up another, we can actually capture the thoughts.
Can I just ask a question, Jill, that might be in other people's minds? I don't know, but just around the ownership really of benefits management strategy, is the assumption that a change manager would be owning that?
I'd be really interested in people's views. I'll give you a quick view for myself. So when I do a benefits realization strategy, what I do is I actually put in that strategy who is going to be deliberate, who's going to own the benefit, and who's going to measure the benefit. So I'm really clear on who's going to make that benefit. And in a piece of work I did a few years ago, in business cases, I made the organisation, and this was when I was doing some corporate governance work, made the organisation identify those in the business case. This is who's going to, you know, probably the name of the job title rather than the name of the person, because they move around, but which part of the organisation and who is going to make that benefit. So I don't know whether anyone's got any thoughts, but it's a great question. So I'm going to add that to it.
I guess for me, the question is around how much the sponsor has to do with this, because in my mind, the sponsor should own the reason why we're doing this. And, you know, then you can break it down to a sort of a lower level of benefits realization. But what is everybody else's experience and view on that?
It's B here. I don't know why my camera isn't on. I'll try and fix it in a minute. I mean, unless you can see me. I mean, I can't see myself, but
no, we can't see you.
No, sorry, no apology. And I did finish my dinner. That was the reason why I put my camera off. I guess it's often these sort of grandiose statements of, you know, more engaged workforce and, you know, revenue, and then when you sort of probe a little bit, it is often what we don't yet know. You know, we have to wait for it to go live, and that's where it sort of starts. And then you have there's then an assumption that as change manager you can actually come up with some of these when you're actually not necessarily, you're not a business expert, put it that way. You don't know, how the business really fully operates.
No.
You're not a BAU person. So that's definitely something I struggle with, is to provide, to try and lead the conversation or guide it to actually come up with something that is half sensible and credible. Yeah, so hence me coming onto this webinar, to be honest, just to see what sort of, how other people, and sometimes it could just be like a simple language thing, you just ask a particular question and all of a sudden people loosen up a bit as well. Because I guess the sense that I'm getting is that people think you're already checking up on them, that you're almost doubting, that this is going to be delivered. So yeah, so it's sort of all sort of different, a few different things in the mix, I think, for me.
Hi, happy to come in there. So yes, so I work for a government department, and I would say in terms of the relationship with the change manager and how they would work, I would see us as facilitating these conversations. So getting the right people in the room, and letting the business experts really share, but just making sure that it's really clear and giving them some structure to think about. I mean, we're fortunate in that we do have a benefits management team that are doing they're now going out into the business doing a lot of upskilling there to get people thinking about benefits right from the very early doors, so we can get that baseline captured. But yeah, I think for me, I would say that as being the change manager role, just making sure that the conversations were happening, the workshops, and we were capturing that data.
Yeah, that's really good. The idea that actually we might not own getting the benefits delivered or own understanding where it comes from, but actually we own the process and the way of helping the organisation do that. Well put, excellent.
Yeah, I think facilitation is really important, isn't it? It's almost like a coaching role. We're there to just try and ease them forward when effectively nobody really knows what they're doing, but they should know why they're doing something, why they're spending money. We should be able to take it from there.
Yeah, and there is usually a very tangible element to it, which I guess is always a good starting point. But at some point soon, I think in that conversation, it's an easy starter, but it's also an easy finisher.
Yeah. What about the idea that for me, I guess one test of a benefit is, can you actually come up with a baseline? Because if you can't come up with a baseline, then it's really, really difficult to demonstrate that you've made any progress.
Yeah, I agree, and I think half the battle is it's not an easy thing to do.
No.
To capture, and I think that can put people off, that kind of fear. So I think anything that we can do to try and just simplify that process a little bit, I think that'll help win hearts and minds a little bit and reduce that anxiety to actually getting stuck in the first place.
So Ruth, just interested in your benefits management team, how do they are they the ones who facilitated on rather than the change manager? And how do they go about it? Do they start with tangible, or have they like a script, or and I mean, I'm assuming in where you work, and obviously it's government, it will be very structured. So you must have a lot of experience already.
Well, no, actually, I mean, we are quite a young government department, and this work's just starting now. So we've built the framework, and then we're putting on awareness raising sessions across the business, and then this team are going to work with the project manager and the project delivery team to actually help facilitate these sessions and start capturing and just talking about the different types of benefits and how to measure them. And so yeah, we are still quite early days, but it's really positive to see that these conversations are now happening and that there'll be some accountability around this benefits capture.
It's impressive. Jill, Donna has put a comment in the chat. She can't get off mute, but she says, I also work for a government department, and as a business change manager, we work closely with our stakeholders. and bring the right people to the table to look at benefits realization, as you sometimes need a subject matter expert to give the correct information. So yeah, I think we'd all be in agreement with that.
Yeah, and I've just copied that into the notes as well.
Cool.
Excellent. And anything else that we would have in our benefit strategy? Anything else we'd expect to see in the benefit strategy?
Have we got the? Oh, sorry if I jumped
No,
in
carry
there.
on, Ruth. Carry on.
Have we've got the benefits owner in there, have we? That so that's kind of understood and people are accountable. And then do we have as well maybe those the leading and the lagging measures, and maybe how frequently they need to be maybe measured, so we can kind of look at the success that we're having to date and share that with people, so we can see that yeah, we are making that difference, and just to inject that new energy into the project team.
Yeah, and welcome Mel as well. Mel, we have got a very small group tonight. We think the football's on, and that's created us a little bit of a problem.
Oh, I have no idea about football, I'm afraid. Is there a well, no, no, nothing I can add to that conversation. Anyway, okay, well, it's nice to be a small group and we can talk about things. Okay, what have we got? Clariton, who makes the benefits, role of the sponsor, they own this. We don't know at an early stage, assumption that it's change manager, you can come up with these ideas. Yeah, so we've worked through the example, have we?
We've worked through all the examples. Yes, we've worked through that, and we're on the first question. So in the room, but we're only in one big room tonight. Identify the headings and the high-level content you think should be included in this strategy.
Can I work back a moment and say, what did you think of the example? When I was capturing it from last week, I found it so incredibly powerful. The thing that's making the difference is aligning certainly the good stuff was if I go back one slide, there was loads of people that were thinking about all the good things that you notice when there's psychological safety, then thinking, well, if we can notice them, we can measure them. But what I thought was really impactful is that was great, really helpful, but it doesn't capture senior leaders. Sponsors won't own it because that's way too low level for them. The next slide I thought was really interesting. We had an amazing expert with us. And she was talking about how you move from psychologically safe, so you can then start to claim some bigger, more business valuable things. We have organizational agility. It's almost as if each of those more strategic pieces actually would capture the senior sponsors' interest and therefore make them own it. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, we talked a lot about sponsors and people in the organization owning things, owning parts of this has been really important. And I think we'd also have a bit of a debate about, turning those, how do you measure positive reputation? How do you measure some of these pieces?
I think that sorry. I was just going to say that one of the things that we had a senior investor with us last week, and he was making the point, that you're not winning the argument. You're not telling me that this is useful. It's not going to cut costs or increase revenue. And it's he kept banging the drum, which is very useful, about everything that you do sounds great and there's loads of activities you keep telling me you're doing in change, but what difference does it make? And what difference does it make to the bottom line? Because ultimately that's what people are going to focus in on. And I found it incredibly helpful to have him there, just keep nagging all the time.
Yeah, sorry, and I think Jenny.
Yeah, no, I'm really interested in the whole conversation, but for me, one of the difficulties is that we want to find benefits for change management, so we want to make sure that we are seen as beneficial. But I suppose what I do see is that we are facilitators for the benefits of the project. So, for me, it's all about people adopting whatever the change is. And I guess I would probably always concentrate on that rather than trying to focus on, so what's our role been in that? Do you know what I mean?
So are you saying that we're hidebound by the business case that the project had put together?
I think we have to be absolutely in alignment with that. Yes. It has to have a kind of a people focus. So, you know, these are the outcomes that we're expecting for the business from this change. We will not get those outcomes unless these people are on board, and that's the bit that we get. That's the bit that we do. But I don't know.
It's really, I think that's really interesting, actually. I think that's a really interesting perspective, that we have to start from, there is already a business case, and those are the benefits that we have to show how we're going to create those. Yeah, I think that's a really nice way of thinking about it. The reason we put this benefits management strategy piece together when we were doing numbers was that, just to give a perspective to the headings, was just thinking, and I certainly looked across all of my clients and think, actually, nobody's strategizing for this. Nobody's actually sitting down and going, okay, this is a big action for us. A strategy is just another word for sort of how on earth am I going to do this? And actually sitting down and going, I need to plan this out from before we even get started. I think what happens, what I see all the time, I want to hear your views, but I see people jumping straight into a change plan. These are all the activities we've got to do, and start to plan it all out and who's going to be involved and everything. But the bigger why is the benefits. And actually, where's the strategy that says, right, one of the key activities we've got to do is we've got to have, from the benefits workshop, we've got to work out what are all the benefits indicators. We've got to then start assigning responsibility for those indicators. I remember in Parliament there was a brilliant guy on data, and he was able to find all these different data points that would indicate that we were going in the right direction in terms of behaviour. And I thought, yeah, but actually now I need to go and find out there's the measures, but who maybe would be interested, who would take ownership of this. And actually that for me is the core strategy, is where are the indicators, where are the measures, where's that data being created somewhere in the organisation that's a key part of a strategy for me. It's thinking. Strategies are just thinking, aren't they? Big thinking.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things, Mel, that I'm working on a project, and when I started on the project, I said, where are the benefits? And they pointed me to the business case. And the more I probed with key stakeholders about what those benefits were, they were more a finger in the air. We think we'll save 1% here because we were told that other organisations have saved 1% of this and 2% of that, and we're a multi-million-pound business, which is a lot of benefit. And so I said, okay, so if we see these benefits, what will be different? What will we see differently in the organisation? So I created a workshop with all the people who were in the know about what the different systems going to make. And we came up with some key areas. So what will it mean for the operations people in your business? What will we see that looks different? And what will it mean for the finance people? What will be different? And then we work back and say, well, if this looks different, what will the benefits be? Very much using that kind of process that we outlined earlier. And we started getting, well, actually, that's what that will mean in terms of benefits. Okay, so then how will we measure that? What will be the measures related to that? So I've got people going back to what's different for the operator. So, for example, they were moving from a system where they walked around and counted stock and put it on a piece of paper, and then they went to the computer system and typed it in. And we said, well, it'll be faster. The new system allows them to choose when they're doing the stock takes, so they can do a stock take when on a quieter day, so they aren't doing it when they're suddenly overloaded with customers in their front end of their business. And then that means they don't have to bring extra people in to do a stock take. They can now say, well, actually, we'll just fit it in with our normal week. The other thing was it would stop them making as many mistakes. So they moved from a system whereby they knew there were errors coming in by writing it down on a piece of paper, then typing it in. They'd go straight into it. So it reduced errors, so they'd have more accurate stock counts, which would mean that they would order at the right time as opposed to making mistakes. And so lots of little benefits starting to creep out.
Did you have senior leaders involved in that?
I had a number of senior leaders. I didn't have everybody involved, but I had somebody representing the operations, somebody representing the finance teams. So a number of key people, including the project sponsor, and ran through it with them.
I think that's a really, I think it's almost like capturing what you've just said, is this is our approach, because you went from big to small to real measures that we can have, the real difference you're going to make. And I think that is, it's almost like I'd make that that effectively is the steps in the strategy. This is what we have to do, and we have to do it every single time. The only bit I'd add to that is then that we have to almost ratify that against what other changes are taking place in the organization, that they've assumed all of those benefits for the stock take, but are there other system changes or personnel changes or process changes that would exacerbate or reduce those benefits, or in some way change the assumption,
isn't it? The context, the validation in a sort of a bigger lens on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because the immediate question I think of there is going to senior leadership and saying, are you signing off on anything that would actually make that not happen? Because that's the bit where it almost like that takes you into portfolio management. Are you actually signing off on anything that's going to shoot you in the foot?
Yeah.
Because this all sounds really positive. You want this to happen, but there's something else going on that's going to stop that or delay it.
Yeah.
So,
I gave earlier an example where I worked in an organisation. We were looking at the governance of the projects they were approving, and I went back to one of the directors and said, do you realise that all these projects deliver the benefits they're saying they're going to deliver? You've got nobody left in your organisation, just letting you know that. And it really started getting them thinking, have we got this right in terms of benefits? Because you don't want to over egg the benefits, because it's very easy on these things to go, well, that'll do that and that'll do that. It will only do all of those things if you really make change happen well.
Maybe that's part of the benefit management strategy then, is to actually validate the business case, because so many of them are, they're meant to get you funding basically, but they're not expected to be actually real. So that's the kind of the first step almost.
Yeah. Makes me think that I want to involve. I did this with International Airlines Group the other day. I talked about the benefits of involving internal audit, and I actually made such a case that I think I've won them over. And it's the same thing for me, I think, is that I want to, this validation we're talking about, I know that in my change practice, that's not where my area of expertise lies. And there's an awful lot of people who are better at communicating than doing this. I'd want to bring in somebody from finance who could really think about how we would measure these things and to help us validate these things. And I think that's something that we just don't think about. And almost having a financial business partner alongside us in change. And I kind of want that to happen. I'm quite excited about that idea. I think that's the one thing I'm going to take away from this right now, is a financial business partner as part of, as I'm looking at all of the community stuff that we've got in the stakeholder analysis and going, well, that's not appearing on there at all. So I'm suddenly starting to think that could be something very interesting. And I do wonder if that is also part of us professionalizing much more, and that suddenly we become a more business-centric practice. And so, of course, we are working closely with our partners in finance to create the financial picture. I just wonder if that might bring us an air of credibility that we don't always have. Just any thoughts on that?
If any stakeholder map excluded finance people, senior finance people for change, because it's got to be something around it. Donna's come back to say we use our financial planning department to look at assumptions, and then benefit realization will get involved.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. We need to be shouting about that more, I think. That I think we need to be shouting about that a lot more. That it's just that I just don't think we make enough of the fact that we are business focused, that we are about delivering business value. We keep talking about delivering change. I think we have to stop.
Yes,
We have to start talking about delivering business value instead.
it's true. And I think that that is a problem with our title in a way. It should be like adoption management rather than change management, because it's about an outcome. It's not about just doing stuff.
Well, the challenge I've got from what one of the sessions I had last week is that it was very clear to me that an awful lot of building the capability for change in across the business is using the word change doesn't make anybody want to get involved. But effectively, what we're really doing is we're helping you get stuff done. I can't find another phrase that describes we're helping you get stuff done.
Yeah.
It seems so informal, get stuff done, but it's so valuable. That's really what we're doing: get stuff done more easily, get stuff done quicker.
It's getting stuff done for a reason, isn't it? It's the
Yeah,
reason rather than just the doing as well. It's
get the right
it's,
stuff done.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But I just can't find a better phrase than get stuff done.
Okay.
So if anybody's got any ideas on that, I would gratefully receive them. Just one of the things I was thinking about actually is using ChatGPT. I use ChatGPT a lot, or sorry, Copilot, and actually put in there what's an alternative phrase for get stuff done.
Yeah, everybody'd want to claim that, wouldn't they, Mel? In an organisation, we all get stuff done. I've also added Donna's comment because I know Donna's microphone's packed up. But everybody'd want to have that title, but I think you're right. There's something there about us making sure things get adopted, that things actually happen.
It's the buy-in piece, isn't it, that is particular to change management. And yeah, it is difficult I think, to come up with a really reliable way of describing what contribution we have made, as opposed to the entire village of a change team. That's the tricky bit.
Yeah,
no easy answers to that.
No, I don't have any easy answers, but I think it's something we've got to. It's all much more about business value than it has been in the past. I think we're starting to see this now. I can see the change because I've been doing this 30 years. I can now start to see change. We're starting to move away from solely talking about all of our activities. I think we are we're starting to talk much more frequently about business value. I just think that's what this was all about. Let's make sure that the benefits management strategy is standard on any project that we do.
And I actually feel that Ruth's comment there, that getting stuff done while considering people, because the whole of the project I'm working with at the moment would tell me they're getting stuff done. It's just that they're forgetting the people on the way. I'm interested in Ruth's kind of comments on that. Ruth, anything else to say on that? You're on mute.
I'm just hugely think that, we can only get stuff done with people. That's the whole thing of leadership, isn't it? We don't do it on our own. We rely on others. So, if we're doing it without considering other people, we're never going to be as effective. And at the end of it all, we need our people to be match fit and resilient and ready to go again, because it won't be the last change. So I think there's got to be an element, but I hugely get the value piece. We've got to align to that, because that's what seniors are there to do, to get results. But again, you can only get results with people.
I think that's a really important point, Ruth. And I think for me, there is almost a sort of a parallel path. So we're helping deliver the project benefits, but actually alongside that, we are helping to build match fitness, as you say, in people. And that's almost a sort of a parallel path. Regardless of what the change is, we're contributing to that ongoing.
I'll just put the colloquial phrases for get stuff done from ChatGPT in there so you can see what's going on. So we're going to move to the last question. Last question. I mean, let's put it up and see if we have the last debate, I suppose. So there's a small group.
So the last one is define where in the change life cycle this is created and how it fits in the project life cycle. So how do we engage sponsors and how do we ensure this goes from idea to reality?
I suppose what I was thinking when I put the question in there is, as far as the change life cycle is concerned, I was thinking about our benefit strategy aligning almost to the project life cycle, where having that conversation, because often I come in and the project business case has been done. So by working through a sort of benefits management strategy, I can sort of highlight to the project teams, you know, these are the kinds of indicators, the kinds of things we'll look for if we're going in the right direction, the leading indicators of people are feeling, you know, this change is making a positive difference. And just by doing that, it's almost an educational piece, because a lot of them will go, oh, I didn't really think about that. It's not really my problem, but it's a minor educational piece, you know.
Yeah, and I think doing it alongside the business case, I think at an early stage is really important, because it does then shine a light on a business case that may be a little bit fluffy and a little bit optimistic. So it does help to sort of bring a reality check to that, but also translate, as you say, you know, work out what that means in terms of what's going to be different. Yeah.
It's a sort of an early education piece for the project team is the first thing. And then the other thing is it's getting it in front of, I think I stand more chance of having an early conversation with the sponsor if I use the word strategy.
Yes.
So going into the sponsor and sort of saying, you know, particularly if they're sponsoring a project and not almost like they haven't really thought about sponsoring the change bit of it, and saying, well, actually, this is working through those headings on the strategy, particularly the types of benefits, the types of indicators, things we're looking for, because I track it all the way back to business value, it gets them engaged. So there's something in there about very early start, but there's also something at the back end about, and don't forget, we need to have made sure that the translation of people checking that these things, the positives are actually happening. Have I transferred that responsibility for each wave if we're doing a more agile change, for each iteration of change? And have I finally handed that over to somebody where it will be celebrated, it will be made that we'll see that it's making a difference, you know? That's the bit I'm interested in, that it's going somewhere.
And just thinking there about whereabouts and thinking about the case for change that we would look to build at the very start, being able to think about the different benefits for different stakeholders and have that information to draw on, and then for seniors to use when they're going out and speaking with people and trying to sell it. That's really useful as well.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's almost like you're teeing them up for, it's almost like you're giving them key points to make, aren't you? Just thinking about the election at the moment and how there are so many researchers just putting in front of ministers key points they need to make.
Or not make.
Yeah, yes, or not make. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really a useful point. It has to be meaningful, and you are almost, this is where you're almost translating that business case into something that's meaningful and is understandable by people on the ground. You know, oh, okay, I get that. That's, you know, the what's in it for me kind of thing. Speaking in their language. It's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that, Dave.
I don't know about anybody else, but when I read the question about define where in the change life cycle it's created, I almost had a bit of a difficult moment there, because it's always too late. Because when I get brought into a project, it's usually started and then they've had something happen that they've thought, oh, we need change management. Because obviously change management isn't needed until we do the training and the communications. So I always get brought in too late. And so the answer I give to that, I do it as soon as I come into a project. It's one of the first things I do to start understanding why are we doing this project and what's the difference it's going to make. but I'd love to get in there earlier and do it alongside the people as they create the business case.
Mhm.
Yeah, again, we've got to just get ourselves in earlier. What we're always saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I do think that word strategy gets us in earlier to certain people that perhaps the idea of a change plan does not. Change plan indicates they might have to do something.
Yeah.
And there might be work involved, but the idea of strategy indicates maybe it's a cup of tea and a biscuit and they can talk about things for a while.
Yeah.
And I think it also gives you a hook to hang a conversation on around a strategy for the organization in terms of change capability. So, you know, again, back to the point, it's not just about an individual change project, but, you know, have a conversation with sponsors and C-suite people about what the organization needs to have in terms of change capability generally, and how this is going to help start to build that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, I was just reflecting. We had over 60 who registered and 10% of those registrations turned up. So I think we've done quite a good conversation on the fact that 90% of the people may have gone to watch. There's a football match. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I know nothing. Why is everybody laughing? Is it a World Cup or something?
It's Euros. It's just taking over the nation a little bit, Mel.
Oh, is the what do they have, a English team playing?
I do. England,
Yes.
Denmark this evening. It's
Oh, okay.
speak, I think.
Okay. That would explain why my Danish friend has not replied to something. Where I live, just the town next door. So here in Malaga, in Fengarola, it's basically Fengarola is Finnish and Danish.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, and then further along the coast it's Norwegian. So you sort of just move from enclave to enclave. I mean, there are Spanish living here too, but certainly along that bit, very Norwegian
so.
and Danish. Yeah, few, but it's mostly Norwegian and Danish, Finnish, and Dutch, huge Dutch. So it's so English a smaller proportion, much smaller proportion. So maybe that's why there's nothing about English football here either. Wow. Okay. Well, that was before our last one before the summer break. So we're moving to the Friday lunchtime. So that was the big thing. We tried different times and we did the poll, and over 57, I think it's 57% wanted Friday lunchtimes. So we'll see what happens and see how we get on.